Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. I asked my friend April SunShine Sanchez to be one of my guests because every time I see her on Facebook, I just feel her testimony and I feel the light that she gives off, if you can feel those things on Facebook. And she is no stranger to trials, as you will hear. But she somehow manages to still exhibit the faith and the testimony that I am striving to also work on. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with her. I hope that you can relate to her, whether or not your trials are as profound as hers. Today, I am here with my friend, April Sanchez, and I would love it, April, if you would introduce yourself.
All right. Yat Shike do Shodane, She April SunShine Martin Sanchez, Nimshie, Nashta Eje Tabaha, Nshle, Naka de Me Bashichin, Honagahni, Dashiche, Totonak, Dashinala, Yate, or Hihet. Also, hola a todos. Me llama April SunShine Martin Sanchez. Soy Latina or Mexicana. Mi papá nació en Coahuila, México. Su padre era de la tribu Totonaca o Totonaque. Yo hablo un poco de español, pero yo comprendo mucho. And greetings, family and friends. I'm happy to be here. My name is April SunShine Martin Sanchez. I am from the Dene or Navajo Nation in the American Southwest. My maternal clan is Zuni Edgewater. I am born for the Mexican People clan. My maternal grandfather's clan is One Who Walks Around. My dad is originally born and originally from Mexico, and his father, mi abuelito, was from an indigenous tribe called the Totonac or the Totonaque, and they reside in the eastern central part of Mexico. So I have indigenous blood from the American Southwest and then indigenous blood from south of the border.
I've never heard you introduce yourself like that before, so that was great. Yeah, so April and I know each other from BYU, and for some people that was a long time ago, and for some people it's like, what are you talking about? That you guys are kids. So depends on who you're asking. So April, I would love to know one of your favorite cultural things, whether it's a story or a celebration or a tradition, one of your favorites about your heritage, especially if it relates to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
So in my mom's culture and Dene culture, you can actually have up to 3 names that you're given in your lifetime, sometimes more. So you have your name that you're given right after you're born. Those names are very kind of characteristic of the child's personality or even events that happened around people's births or just funny family things that have happened. So when my mom was little, I think it was her grandfather, who he was trying to wake her up because in Navajo culture, you're supposed to wake up before the sun. So she had fallen asleep the night before, obviously, and had slept through the night. And when the morning came, he tried to wake her up before the sun came up. And the tradition is you don't want to burden the sun. So you want to wake up before the sun does, and you want to greet him. And that's when you say morning prayers. Some people pray with corn pollen. And it's in an easternly direction, because that's where the sun comes up. So she told us a story of when my grandfather was, or my great grandfather, her grandfather was trying to wake her up, and she wouldn't leave her sheepskin. And he tried to talk to her, to shake her shoulders, and she was really small at this point, probably maybe 2 or 3, I think. And she did not want to get out. It was a cold morning. She didn't want to leave the hogan. So instead of trying to pick her up, he grabbed her sheepskin and dragged it outside with him.
Mm-hmm.
And she was still on a sheepskin, so she got up and grabbed the other end of the sheepskin and drug it back into the hogan. And he was just stood there shocked. And so he went again and grabbed her, and she drug it back in. And then at that point, he got a shovel, and she's so tiny that he just put the shovel and dug underneath the dirt of her little sheepskin and carried her out on a shovel. I wouldn't put her down. and she was so upset, and he had to take her back inside. And she has a little nickname from that time, because he tried to get her off the shovel and she held on to the shovel. And so her nickname at that time was called Horsefly, because the horsefly grips onto the horse and it won't leave it alone, even if the horse is moving and trying to, swat it away with the hair and everything. And so she said her first name from her, I believe it was her maternal grandfather, was Horsefly. And I wish I could say it in Navajo. She says it's so cute. And that really stuck with me because, you would think in English, wow, that's not a very desirable name. You're named after a fly.
Yeah.
But it was the story around it. It was the experience, and also kind of her characteristic, because they said that she would also cling to whoever was holding her. She would just hold them, cuddle them so tight, just like a little horsefly. She didn't want to let go. And so she got carried a lot when she was younger. And that was something that he really enjoyed about her personality. And even when she got older and was in her teen years, and even as an adult, he would tell that story about her. And it was kind of explaining in his way his love for her, and this really dear memory he had of her, how she outwitted him, and he thought he could outwit her, and she outwitted him in the end. But then also it was a way of kind of explaining her character, even when she was young, and that character, that personality trait kind of stayed consistent, that she holds on to those that she loves dearly. Mm-hmm. and she expresses that often. So for myself, I love the naming, because at least in the Diné culture, you can receive names through ceremonies. Oftentimes those names aren't shared publicly. The medicine man will know those specific names, and sometimes just those that are in the ceremonies. But you can be gifted other names at different parts of your life, out of events and given from family members. And when we were growing up, we didn't have the blessing or the privilege to grow up with our people. My parents were called away off the reservation, but that was something that they kept very strongly in our family, was the naming. And I remember as a young girl, we lived in Provo. My dad was a bishop on the campus at that point. But when my youngest brother Moroni was born, we had a naming ceremony for him, or just a celebration, I guess that's the better word. And we had friends from different tribes come, and then my dad discussed the name that they had been blessed with, that they had felt in the temple to give my younger brother. And it was a beautiful experience for me, and I will remember that always. When I got older, my father would tell me the story of how I received my name and the day I was born. And so my name, as everyone heard, I said like 3 different times, is April Sunshine. That's actually my first name. And my middle name is Martin, which is my mom's maiden name. And then obviously my last name is Sanchez. When I was really discouraged and struggling through who I was and my identity, I would go and seek out my parents. My dad would tell me the story of how he received my name, April Sunshine. And he said that before I was born, he was really looking for employment, and he was barely bringing enough food home to feed my mom and my 3 older brothers. And he really worried about feeding another little mouth. He said at that point, he had been surrounded with a lot of spiritual darkness and discouragement. And he said that the morning he rushed my mom to the hospital when she went into labor, and they were praying that I was healthy and that I was going to be okay. When I was born, my dad said that my mom filled the delivery room with screams of joy because they told her that I was a girl. They put me in my dad's arms after, and he said that the day had started out cloudy, but that when the nurse put me in his arms, some sun broke through the clouds and filled the delivery room with light. And he said, "You brought light back in my life when it was dark." And then he specifically named me April Sunshine because he said the events that happened in the month of April are very sacred. So for us members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for us, the restoration of our church happened in the month of April. We celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, so Easter in April. And so he would tell me that I needed to be like those events that happened in the month of April. Having that story told back to me helped me fight the darkness, and it gave me direction and identity. And I would remember that I just wasn't April Sunshine, but that specifically it is the light of the sun in the month of April. To condense that into English, it is April Sunshine.
That's so great. And I love how much your parents put into that, because they recognize that that's a sacred thing that you're going to be literally carrying with you all through your life. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering if you feel comfortable sharing with the listeners some of the trials that you have gone through and how you have been able to get through them.
I've had some significant health problems. A lot of them are just hereditary. Both families have displayed a tendency to have abnormal heart rhythms. It's a rather big common thing in our family. I started having heart problems back in 2009 when I was it was during my last semester of my undergrad at BYU, Hawaii. I was really young to start having heart problems, so I was about 28. It was really unexpected, and for about 10 years I struggled with that. I've had heart attacks, I've had a stroke, minor heart attack. For about a decade of my life, I was struggling and striving to just live, to just survive. Actually, I'm going to be celebrating my second year this coming April of having no heart problems, which ironically is so weird for me after a decade of just trying to live. So in those 10 years, I had a lot of very significant spiritual experiences, a lot of heartache, a lot of very long prayers, a lot of time to myself. When you're sick, a lot of things are happening internally, and sometimes machines are lucky enough to catch them, and some of them show up on your face from the pain and the anguish and things like that. But a lot of the fight is internal and mental, emotional, physical. It's happening inside. Mm-hmm. So for myself, I've been on this journey of learning to survive and push through when I felt like I couldn't anymore. Some of the heart attacks I've had have been on very significant days, unfortunately. On my sister's birthday, I was rushed to the Phoenix Indian Hospital because I was having a heart attack. Then the following year, in 2018, I'm sorry. So for my stroke, I have memory problems. And after my stroke, I actually couldn't speak all that well. My short-term memory was shot. I couldn't really read. I lost a lot of my math skills. I thought I was good at math. I'm no longer good at math.
Yeah.
I had to get a lot of my hand-eye coordination back. I couldn't remember how to button a shirt. I couldn't remember how to tie shoes. I'm a writer, and I couldn't remember more than 3 letters or numbers at a time. And so I went through a lot of depression because I knew I was put on this world to write and I couldn't do it. I would try. I got to a point where my brain was active enough to actually read, but it couldn't retain anything. So I remember reading things and having no idea what they're saying. Not a clue.
Mm-hmm.
It has been such a journey of learning how to do things over again, accepting my setbacks. I really had to learn what was important and what I could carry and what I couldn't carry. And there was a day when I was laying in bed, and this was after my stroke, and my stroke happened December 2014. And it was a weird sensation to wake up, and I knew I was different. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. It took me a few weeks to actually like verbally say sentences out loud. I could say words, right? But like to actually describe emotions and thoughts, I couldn't do that. So my mom asked if I was hungry, and I was like, yeah. Asked if I'm tired, I was like, yeah. But I want to lay down, yeah. Kind of like those things, like very, very. I could answer very easily answered questions,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as like, how's your body feeling today? I had no idea what to tell her,
Mm-hmm.
or what my siblings lovingly call stroke brain.
Oh.
Which actually that helped a lot because I felt like such a failure because I couldn't remember anything. It actually took me several years to get back my short-term memory, having this recurring problem for about 7 months. And finally, I think it had been enough time for my brain to make some neural connections where I could turn to my mom and be like, hey, I'm having this problem. And she's like, for how long? And I'm like, 7 months. And she's like, 7 months. Oh my goodness. And so then we found specialists. So for about 10 years, I struggled off and on with different and separate heart episodes. The second to last episode was about 2 years ago on my birthday. So April 2019. And that one was probably the hardest one I've ever been through because I knew my spirit was leaving my body already and I could feel it. And during that heart attack, I turned to my mom and said, if I leave, just call me back. We were driving up from Phoenix, Arizona to drop off my grandma back on her house on the Navajo reservation. And she had just been released from the hospital down here from the cardiologist from Desert Banner Heart Hospital. And so we were taking her back, and it was my birthday, and I thought, yeah, why not? Like, it's going to be a road trip with three of my best friends, like my grandma, my mom, and my auntie. And so we'll just head out, we'll get some mutton stew or a mutton sandwich and, have some fry bread and enjoy that. And, and then come home and I can celebrate with my siblings and my dad, the day after or whatever. And it was on our way up past Flagstaff. We had stopped at the Maverick when the heart attack came on. And I told my mom that. And immediately, every mother's like, we're turning around. So she turned our car around and went back to Flagstaff to the emergency room. The only way I was able to survive all of that was because the power of God that's on this earth. I was given, I can't tell you how many priesthood blessings through my father, through my brother-in-law, through my brothers, and in this particular experience, through 4 young elder missionaries who were actually at a service project about 5 minutes away from the emergency room. I don't think that's a mistake at all.
Yeah.
My dad, who was back in Phoenix, actually knew something was wrong and had felt through the spirit that my life was in danger. And he felt that this might be one of the last times that he would see me. So he went to his garden in our backyard and prayed and received the inspiration that he needed to call the missionaries ASAP. So he called them, and they happened to be the same missionaries that had blessed my grandma when she was having heart problems and had gone to the same hospital. Like, no mistakes.
They're like, we already know them.
Yeah. They're like, oh, Brother Sanchez. Actually, they did. The missionaries were so cute. They told my dad, Brother Sanchez, we don't have on our suits. We're in, casual attire. And my dad said, elders, you might have taken off your suits, but you didn't take off your priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to go and bless my daughter. She's dying. And I was. I knew it. I couldn't feel my body completely. I felt like I was half in, half out. And as I sat there in the waiting room, they had actually checked, they had brought me in on a wheelchair because I couldn't walk, checked me with an EKG. It all looked normal, which is a horrible curse in our family. And they went to release me, and my mom said, no, she's in danger. You need to monitor her. And so they put us out in the lobby. And I remember sitting there as 4 elder missionaries showed up and saw us, and they smiled so bright. And my mom looked up, and this wave of relief came over both of us. And they walked over and they said, Sister Sanchez. She said, yes. And he knew I was in distress. And so he came and sat down next to me and helped me raise the water. I had this water bottle that I was trying to drink out of, but I was so weak I couldn't bring it to my mouth, and I had been trying. And my mom had been on the phone with my dad and others trying to get help. The elder came and sat next to me and helped picked up the bottom of the bottle and lifted it to my mouth so I could drink. And then helped me put it down safely so I didn't spill it. And then I looked at him and I said, if I leave, just call me back. And he looked at me, straightened up his back, got the brightest smile on his face and said, we will. And then they surrounded me, standing, and they all placed their hands lightly on my head. And I felt this almost invisible, if you could say invisible force field come down all around me. And in that moment, I knew I was going to be okay. And the first thing they did was to command my spirit to completely re-enter my body again. And it did. I felt myself return completely back to my body. And then I could feel my body, which was weird because I could only half feel it the whole experience. I knew what having a heart attack felt like. I knew the pains because I had gone through it several times. And they also told me that Heavenly Father loved me and then let me know that because of the faith of those here and my faith and the faith of my family, I was going to be okay. I was going to recover.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, they ended the blessing and they looked at my mom and I and asked, is there anything else we can do? And at that point, we both knew that I was going to survive. And so we told them, we're going to be okay, elders. My mom told me, you did everything. You did it all. The interesting thing for me was about anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes later, all the things that I had felt were going wrong with my body dissipated. After the priesthood blessing, I actually stood on my own. I had all my energy had returned back to me, and I stood up, and my ability, my consciousness, I was able to speak and talk to my mom. And I looked at her and I said, I need to go to the restroom, and then just took off walking. And it was like just like every mother, she was like grabbing everything we had and was picking it up and just tracing me as if I was a toddler, just headed out to go to use the restroom as if nothing had happened. There was no emergency going on. And after I was done, they came out to get me, and they had brought a wheelchair, and they're surprised that I was up walking around and I was talking. And I looked at them like, oh yeah, I was dying. And so they helped me into the wheelchair, took me back and had me under observation for a few hours and checked my lungs, did the x-rays and all that stuff, and went through multiple tests and everything, and came back and said, you haven't suffered any significant damage on your heart. I was really grateful to hear that. And then they released me. This was several hours later. For a large chunk of my life, there's a lot of things that I've experienced in a short amount of time. One of them I know with all of my soul and with all of my heart is that the power of God, which is called the priesthood of God, saves and heals and restores. At times in my life, it was immediate, and other times it wasn't. But eventually it did happen. And so for myself, I know I wouldn't be alive if God hadn't extended his power here on earth through worthy men, meaning men who are keeping an honest connection to him, who were keeping their temple covenant. And every time I have received a priesthood blessing, it has restored my heart to where they knew something was really going on with my heart, and they'd put me through tests and they found things. And then they would come back after priesthood blessings and they would say, your heart is fine now, and we don't know how. For myself, from all of this, I realized that anybody who tells you that life is meant to be easy and without struggle is not telling the truth. Anybody who tells you that the gospel will save you from heartache does not understand the purpose of this life. I have come to understand now that this life isn't supposed to be devoid of heartache or trial. It's not supposed to be devoid of pain. It's not supposed to be devoid of disappointment. If it was, then I would have learned nothing from my decade of heart problems and almost dying. What I learned was to keep the most important things close to you, to live for those things. That's my family. That they are the most important part of living. God hears and answers prayers, even when all you can do is breathe. He knew what I was thinking. He knew my fear. And for that past decade that I went through, he carried me through, and he still does. Because there were things that him and I talked about during those 10 years that no one else knows. Times when all I could do was lay in bed and recover. And he was the only person I could talk to because I couldn't physically talk to my family. I would talk to him internally and tell him what was going on, and that I was scared and that I needed help. And he knew. And so there were times when I would face medical professionals and other people in my life, and they would say, you don't look like you have problems. You say you have memory problems, but you've been talking to me this whole time. And I'm like, sir, if you had asked me like what we were originally talking about, I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you. Like, yeah. I don't, like, I've forgotten your name right now. I know I never want to tell anybody that. The interesting thing is now that I've come out of that, which has taken me also years to come out of that, and to accept the fact that I'm going to be living, because that's what he told me in one of my priesthood blessings, that I was going to live a long time. I was disappointed. That sounds horrible, but when you've gone through suffering, when you've gone through pain, when you feel like you've gone past your limits and you don't know why you're even on the earth anymore, and then God tells you, guess what? You're going to have a long life. My body was like, actually, we probably have like 5 or 10 more years. And I was like, sweet. And just kind of high-fived myself. And I was like, we can endure to the end. We can do this like 5 or 10 years. Like, this is awesome. Like, you know, we couldn't be a mom, but that's okay because we're going to endure to the end. We're solid. We're going to make it. And then, you know, for Heavenly Father to tell me in a priesthood blessing, guess what? You're going to live a long time. I was so mad because I told them, I don't want to live like this. This is hard. And so it's interesting because even after I got what I wanted, what I had prayed for, that I wanted to live, I wanted to have a life, I wanted to live until old age, even when he told me I was going to have that, I was upset because I didn't want to live with heart problems.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be in pain. And so when I saw this long life ahead of me, I immediately was like, I'm not sure if I can keep doing this, if I can stay on this crazy, unexpected roller coaster.
Yeah.
What was interesting is it took the same amount of faith and almost more that it took to survive each episode, to choose to live and to choose to accept that I was going to live a long time.
Yeah.
And that one I'm still learning to completely accept. But it's interesting because through this experience, I learned that Heavenly Father does want the best for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound like paradoxical, but there are things that I learned in that experience that I don't think, well, actually, I know I wouldn't have come to understand except for in those moments.
Thank you for being so vulnerable for us and teaching us. I just have one more question. What does it mean to you to know that you are of the tribe of Israel?
It actually means everything to me. growing up in the house that I grew up in, both my parents are converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Both grew up in a very vocally racist, you could say, America. They grew up being told that they weren't going to be more than a sheep herder on the res, as if that's a bad thing. So there was such negativity surrounding their personal identities, even though there were counters to that too, even in the culture, right? Like so much strength in matriarchal tribes and clans, and there were still those negative and discouraging voices that wanted to keep people from succeeding. And when my parents became members of the church, it expanded their understanding of who they are and their purpose and what and who they could become. And so I grew up in a household where my father and mother both said the Book of Mormon is our first culture. It is our heritage. That is the story of your people. Those are your ancestors. They wrote to you. And all of that is through the House of Israel. What I've come to understand as an adult is the Book of Mormon has never stopped. We, as the native peoples on the Americas, are the continuation of the Book of Mormon. So we only have until Moroni, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's someone still writing in a cave somewhere, or maybe they're on a tablet or a laptop now. Who knows? But there are still record keepers because we are still here. The people of Father Lehi are still here, and the blessings of the House of Israel are still on this land. That was never completely destroyed or lost. And so for me, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, being a member of the House of Israel and a descendant of Father Lehi, who descends back through, because he was Manasseh, who descends back through, even Joseph of Egypt, it changes and fights all of those negative voices that tries to make me believe that I'm less than I am, when in fact I have a royal heritage, and that royal heritage is alive. And there's even a whole book about it. Hopefully every member of the church is reading that book.
Yeah.
and I think that's going to be the interesting thing for me at least, as more of our people learn about our identity and read our book, they will understand more about the things in our culture that keep us close to, in Navajo we say Dien, close to the Creator, close to God, and why we are the way we are. And so the House of Israel has a really important responsibility still yet to be fulfilled here. And I think that's the thing I would like to encourage everybody who's listening, everybody of Native descent, that someday the Creator is going to call upon us to use our talents, to use our gifts, to use our stories, to use the good of our culture to help prepare everybody, because we know that the Creator is coming back. We have stories. We have stories of when a being of light was among us. And he's coming back.
Yep.
And I feel like as Native peoples, that responsibility of sharing that story with the peoples of the world through our dances, through our culture, through our languages, through our songs and our stories, that is our responsibility, that we need to share that. Because when he came, he gave us each gifts, and some of us still retain those gifts even now. And he's in our language, in our stories. He's in our drawings on the walls. He's in our history. So to be of the House of Israel, for me, it comes with responsibilities. Not just to say, oh, I pat myself on the back and be like, yep, I'm of the House of Israel. I'm a descendant of Father Lehi. It's more than that.
Yeah.
That identity comes with responsibilities and an acceptance on my part if I'm going to step into that responsibility. And that means that I give all I can to the Creator, to Heavenly Father, so that we can bring those stories to light. And it's interesting because when we share our spirituality as Native people, it touches people's hearts in a way where they feel it, and it's almost like they can recognize that there was a missing piece somewhere, and it's coming back to them. So being of the House of Israel really guides my life. And so I walk with that.
I love that answer. So thank you so much. Thank you for being so open and honest, and this might be a bad pun, but heartfelt. I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you are my friend and that you've given this time to all of us.
Well, thank you for reaching out to me, and I'm getting back my ability to write. This is a great opportunity for me to not only practice, but also gave me some time to write some of these things down and to expand upon them. And I'm hoping in the future to release some of my writings and just share some of the things that I've learned. So this has been really good for me too. Thank you.
I did that terrible pun at the end. But I wanted to read some scriptures too. Here's one. It's in John 14, verse 1. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In Matthew 5, verse 8, it says, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In Deuteronomy 6, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And then in 1 Samuel 16, it says, But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Just as I think about April and her heart, her poor heart, I know that she has a pure heart and that she is seeking to do these things to come closer to the Lord because she has a heart that is willing and broken. And I think that's a lesson for all of us. I think that whether or not our hearts are literally broken, we can have them broken the way the Lord wants us to, so we can give our will to Him. And I've been thinking about that and thinking about April and April's sunshine. I hope that your heart is in a good place. I hope that you're having a super wonderful, awesome day, and if you're not, go have one. Tribe of Testimonies is not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. If you know someone who might be interested in being a guest, please reach out to me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.